He founded several monasteries. A man of faith who, through his evangelization, converted many people. Today's curiosities are about Saint Columbanus. Here are 10 facts about him. 10. Noble and intellectual origins. Saint Columbanus was born around 543 in the province of Leinster, Ireland, into a noble and wealthy family. His illustrious lineage and family resources provided him with a privileged education from an early age, allowing him to stand out as one of the most notable figures of his time. The combination of his high social status and access to quality education not only made him a cultured man but also endowed him with exceptional intelligence, evident in his study of sacred scripture and human sciences. Despite being blessed with a life of wealth and privilege, Columbanus did not succumb to the material temptations that his position could offer. He always had an intense curiosity about the spiritual and the divine, seeking wisdom and Christian truth through his intellectual education. His academic background delved deeply into sacred scripture and theology, as well as disciplines like philosophy and natural sciences that shaped his worldview. This intellectual mastery was fundamental to his development as a religious leader and reformer. With his rich education, Columbanus became not only a great monk but also a respected thinker whose ideas profoundly influenced the medieval church. He articulated a clear and profound vision of monastic life, blending rigor and spirituality, attracting followers, and shaping the establishment of future monasteries throughout his missionary journey. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, make sure to do so to not miss any curiosities about the saints. 9. Spiritual beginnings. The spiritual beginnings of Saint Columbanus are marked by an intense quest for wisdom and understanding of divine truths. From a young age, he showed a deep inclination toward the study of sacred scripture, which at the time was considered the foundation of religious and intellectual education. Growing up in a Christian environment, Columbanus was influenced by the Catholic faith that permeated his life, but he also possessed an intellectual curiosity that led him to explore human sciences, including philosophy and theology. His spiritual journey began under the guidance of his mother, a woman of deep faith who encouraged Columbanus to distance himself from the temptations of the material world and dedicate himself to the service of God. She prepared him for a life of renunciation and prayer, advising him to live a pure and devout life. This spiritual counsel was fundamental to the development of his religious vocation, since Columbanus was an attractive, intelligent, and admired young man, which made it difficult for him to escape the temptations of worldly life. Faced with this reality, he sought guidance from wise teachers and religious figures. At the age of 16, Columbanus entered the monastery of Clúain Innis, Clays, in Northern Ireland, where he began his deeper study of scripture. There, under the guidance of his master, Abbot Sinnel, he devoted himself intensely to the study of scripture and the teachings of the Church. This period was crucial for shaping his spiritual and intellectual character, as it was there that he experienced the combination of a rigorous monastic life with a genuine quest for divine wisdom. Over time, Columbanus furthered his education by studying in the most rigorous monastic schools, such as the Monastery of Bangor in Ireland. Under the supervision of Abbot Comgall, Columbanus experienced an environment of intense spiritual discipline, marked by fasting, continuous prayer, and deep meditation. This austere environment not only strengthened his faith but also prepared him for the future when he would be called to lead the evangelization of distant lands. 8. Founder of monasteries. Saint Columbanus was one of the greatest founders of monasteries in medieval Europe. and his mission as a religious reformer was deeply tied to the establishment of various monastic communities that played a crucial role in evangelization and the revitalization of Christian culture across Europe. His missionary journey, which began in Ireland, expanded to multiple countries, carrying with it the spirit of renewal and a desire to form monks committed to a life of prayer, discipline, and the study of sacred scripture. The first major foundation of Columbanus was the monastery of Bangor, located in northeastern Ireland. This monastery became one of the most important monastic centers in the region, where Columbanus and his followers lived in strict austerity, dedicating themselves to manual labor, study, and prayer. Life in Bangor was marked by rigorous discipline and a high level of intellectual activity, with the monks constantly engaged in learning the scriptures and cultivating spirituality. It was in this monastery that Columbanus developed the foundations for his future establishments, creating a monastic community that combined asceticism and deep devotion to God. After undergoing various stages of spiritual and intellectual growth, Columbanus felt called to move beyond Ireland's borders and bring his mission to mainland Europe. He departed with 12 companions for France, where he founded the monastery of Luxeuil in the Burgundy region around the year 590. This foundation had an immediate impact, attracting many followers drawn by the monks' example of faith and devotion. At Luxeuil, Columbanus implemented a strict monastic discipline and promoted a profound spiritual renewal that not only revitalized Christian faith in the region but also contributed to the cultural revival of medieval Europe. In addition to Luxeuil, Columbanus founded other monasteries in France, such as Fontaines in Burgundy, and in other parts of Europe, including Switzerland and Italy. In Bobbio, Liguria, Italy, he established what would become one of the most renowned monasteries of his life. Bobbio was a center of evangelization and education, where the preservation and transmission of Christian and secular knowledge became priorities. Over the centuries, the monastery of Bobbio grew into a place of great importance for the Catholic Church and a beacon of learning, attracting scholars and religious figures from across Europe. The hallmark of all these monasteries was their emphasis on education and the preservation of knowledge, something particularly significant during a period of cultural and political decline on the continent. Columbanus not only founded monasteries but also established schools within them, where monks were educated in theology, philosophy, and the human sciences. They also dedicated themselves to copying sacred manuscripts and engaging in missionary work. Leave your prayer request in the comments below so Saint Columbanus may intercede for you before God. 7. Pilgrimage for Christ. The pilgrimage of Saint Columbanus was a paradigmatic example of extreme devotion and evangelizing mission. For him, pilgrimage was not merely a religious journey but an unceasing quest for Christ, marked by sacrifices, challenges, and a missionary fervor that transcended Ireland's borders and spread across Europe. This journey was understood as a divine calling, a pilgrimage for Christ, in which Columbanus sought not only the conversion of souls but also the renewal of faith in distant lands often hostile to the Christian message. In a historical context marked by barbarian invasions, political and spiritual decay, Columbanus and his companions embarked on a difficult and risky mission. They crossed turbulent seas and undertook long overland journeys, facing natural dangers such as storms and resource scarcity, as well as religious and cultural challenges. For Columbanus, this pilgrimage was not simply a physical journey but an intense embodiment of the Christian concept of pilgrimage, walking with Christ in a world in need of his light and message of salvation. The idea of pilgrimage for Christ was deeply rooted in the concept of spiritual pilgrimage, which for Columbanus meant total surrender to God and a way to follow Christ's example, who also journeyed on earth in his mission of salvation. Thus, Columbanus's pilgrimage was not limited to mere travel but was a continuous search for true faith and a deeper relationship with God. With every new territory he reached, his mission expanded, and he dedicated himself to evangelization, founding monasteries, and spreading Christian teachings. Beyond founding monasteries, Columbanus's pilgrimage also involved direct opposition to religious practices he deemed heretical, such as Arianism, and the fight for the purity of Christianity. On many occasions, he found himself in conflict with local authorities, such as King Theuderic of Burgundy, and with bishops who disagreed with his moral and religious strictness. Columbanus did not hesitate to challenge established norms and secular and ecclesiastical authority, believing his mission was faithful only to God's call. 6. Challenges and rigidity. Saint Columbanus was famously known for his strict discipline and extreme asceticism, which profoundly shaped life in the monasteries he founded during his missionary journey across Europe. His approach to monastic life and Christian discipleship was driven by an unrelenting pursuit of faith purity, demanding strict adherence to rules that reflected his vision of a life fully dedicated to God, free from the distractions of the secular world. Monastic life under Columbanus's guidance was marked by severe asceticism, where monks were challenged to lead austere lives. Columbanus believed that rigorous discipline was essential for personal sanctification, helping to purify human weaknesses and fostering a deeper communion with God. The monks in his monasteries adhered to rules that included frequent fasting, long prayer vigils, constant manual labor, and isolation from the outside world. The goal was to cultivate humility, penance, and spiritual purity, distancing themselves from temptations that, according to Columbanus, could divert the soul from the true Christian path. One significant source of tension regarding Columbanus's imposed discipline was his adherence to the Irish liturgical calendar, which differed from the Roman calendar. This conflict became especially notable at the Synod of 603, where Columbanus refused to conform to Roman Easter practices and insisted on preserving Irish traditions. His resistance to aligning with established church norms, even when it led to confrontations with higher authorities, exemplified his zeal for doctrinal purity and his desire to maintain the authenticity of Christianity as he understood it. While Columbanus's strict approach was a source of tension and controversy, it also proved highly effective in spiritual formation and the establishment of monastic communities that profoundly influenced medieval Europe. His emphasis on faith purity and relentless discipline helped preserve and revitalize Christianity during a time of great challenges, such as the political and cultural decline of Europe following barbarian invasions. 5. Miracle at Sea. During one of his missionary journeys across Europe with his 12 companions, Columbanus faced what seemed like an insurmountable challenge, a fierce storm at sea. On one of their routes, as they sailed through unfamiliar and treacherous waters, Columbanus and his group were caught in a violent storm. The massive waves and powerful winds threatened to destroy the boat, endangering not only the lives of the monks but also the mission they were carrying forward. The situation grew increasingly dire as the boat rocked violently, and the sailors feared the vessel would be engulfed by the turbulent waters. In this critical moment, with everyone on the verge of despair, Saint Columbanus, demonstrating his usual courage and unwavering trust in God, refused to succumb to fear. He knelt down, raised his hands to the heavens, and began to pray fervently. Amid the chaos of the storm, his words were a heartfelt plea for divine assistance. He called upon God to calm the waters and protect their mission, placing full trust in God's power over nature. Miraculously, As Columbanus prayed with absolute faith, the waves began to subside, and the wind lost its strength. The once tempestuous sea became calm in an instant, allowing the boat to continue safely on its journey. Columbanus's companions, witnessing this extraordinary event, were awestruck by God's power manifested through the saint's fervent prayer. This miracle at sea not only demonstrated Columbanus's unshakable faith but also reinforced the belief that God was with him in his mission to bring the gospel to Europe. 4. Miraculous conversion. During his missionary travels across Europe, Saint Columbanus not only proclaimed the Christian faith but also became an instrument of extraordinary miracles, which played a crucial role in converting pagans and spreading Christianity. His power to heal and his divine intercession in times of great need were visible signs of God's presence in his life and mission. These miracles were not merely demonstrations of divine power but also effective means of drawing hearts and minds to the Christian faith, especially in regions where paganism and superstition still prevailed. One of the most remarkable miracles performed by Columbanus occurred during a severe drought that threatened to destroy the crops in a region where he was preaching. The desperate inhabitants turned to their pagan gods, but their efforts failed, and their fields continued to wither. Seeing their distress, Columbanus led them in a prayer procession, asking God for mercy and divine intervention. Through his fervent prayer and faith, Columbanus pleaded with the Lord to send the rain needed to save the crops and sustain the lives of the people. When his prayer concluded, something miraculous happened. Clouds began to gather on the horizon, and within hours, a torrential rain fell upon the parched land, bringing life back to the fields. The villagers, who had been steeped in their pagan beliefs, were deeply moved by this miracle, which revealed the power of the Christian God. Overwhelmed with gratitude, many began converting to Christianity, recognizing that the saint's prayer had truly made a difference in their lives. Another remarkable miracle of Columbanus occurred when a devastating plague struck the region, rapidly claiming lives. Faced with the imminent death of many, Columbanus and his monks devoted themselves to caring for the sick, praying fervently for each one of them. On one occasion, a young woman was on the brink of death and had already been declared beyond hope by doctors and her family. Without hesitation, Columbanus knelt beside her and, with deep faith, traced the sign of the cross over her body. To everyone's astonishment, the young woman opened her eyes and rose completely healed, as if through a direct act of divine will. This event became a profound testament to faith for all who witnessed it, and many who had previously been distant from the church drew closer to experience the power of Christ and to be baptized. The miraculous conversions of pagans through the signs and healings performed by Saint Columbanus helped pave the way for the expansion of Christianity in medieval Europe. These miracles not only demonstrated God's compassion for human suffering but also served as a means of guiding people to the true faith, encouraging them to abandon pagan practices in search of the salvation offered by Christ. 3. Relationship with King Theuderic. The relationship between Saint Columbanus and King Theuderic of the Franks was marked by intense conflict, primarily due to religious differences and the Irish monk's rigid moral stance, which led him to criticize the monarch's practices without hesitation. Theuderic, a powerful political ruler, engaged in behaviors and choices that were far from aligning with the values Columbanus upheld. This created escalating tension between them. One of the main sources of conflict was Columbanus's accusations of immorality against King Theuderic. The ruler, known for his tyrannical style of governance, was criticized for his life of excesses, especially regarding his personal relationships and policies. Theuderic maintained adulterous relationships, and by the Christian standards of the time, his conduct was considered morally corrupt. Columbanus, renowned for his strict discipline and zeal for the purity of the Christian faith, could not refrain from pointing out the king's failings. Additionally, Columbanus opposed the presence of heresies, such as Arianism, which were gaining traction among some leaders of the time, including certain figures in the royal court. Arianism, a dissident Christian doctrine that denied the full divinity of Jesus Christ, was regarded as a grave heresy by the Catholic Church. King Theuderic, who sympathized with these beliefs, openly challenged Christian orthodoxy. Columbanus saw this heresy as a significant threat to the purity of the true faith. Over time, the growing tension between Columbanus and Theuderic escalated, particularly when the Irish monk publicly criticized the king's behavior and his lack of commitment to authentic Christian faith. Frustrated by the constant criticisms, Theuderic summoned Columbanus to appear at a synod in 603 to address his religious practices, including his observance of Easter according to the Irish calendar rather than the Roman calendar adopted by the Church. At the synod, Columbanus stood firm in his convictions. Instead of yielding to pressure and conforming to practices that did not align with his vision of Christian faith, he challenged the attending bishops, proposing a broader discussion of canonical irregularities and moral issues being tolerated in the court. This audacious stance and Columbanus's refusal to accept the norms established by the king and local church authorities further deepened Theuderic's dissatisfaction with the monk. The situation reached a breaking point when Columbanus openly denounced Theuderic's immoral behavior. The king, already irritated and perceiving Columbanus as a threat to his power, issued an order for the Irish monk and his followers to be expelled. 2. Expulsion and Exile. The expulsion of Saint Columbanus from Loo, a city he had helped revitalize through his intense dedication to the Christian faith, was not the end of his mission but the beginning of a new phase of pilgrimage and evangelization. After King Theuderic issued an order of exile, Columbanus and his Irish disciples were forced to leave Frankish territory and abandon the monastery they had founded. Accompanied by his 12 disciples, the Irish monk crossed the borders of France, facing turbulent seas, untamed regions, and peoples often resistant to the Christian faith. This forced exile was not a punishment for Columbanus but an opportunity to further expand his missionary work. The first destination of Columbanus after his expulsion was the region of Switzerland, where he sought new lands to establish monasteries. In this area, he faced considerable challenges, both physical, such as natural difficulties and transportation issues, and spiritual, as he attempted to convert local peoples who still adhered to pagan beliefs. In Bregenz, he tried to evangelize the Alemanni, but despite his efforts, resistance was strong, and religious and political challenges became evident. He established new monasteries, such as Reichenau in what is now Switzerland, where his evangelization work gained new momentum. In these monasteries, Columbanus imposed the same strict discipline that had characterized his communities in Ireland, with a rigorous focus on prayer, asceticism, and the purity of Christian life. Although monastic life was severe, the fruits of faith became evident, as many converted and embraced Christianity. Despite the resistance he encountered wherever he went, Columbanus continued to expand his mission. He eventually reached Italy, where he was welcomed by the Lombard king Agilulf, who recognized his sanctity and understood that the presence of the Irish monk could help strengthen the Christian faith in the region. In Bobbio, Columbanus founded a monastery that would become one of the greatest centers of spirituality and education in medieval Italy. This monastery not only became a significant focal point for the faithful but also played a central role in preserving knowledge and culture during the Middle Ages. 1. Foundation of Bobbio. The foundation of the Bobbio Monastery in Italy was one of the culminating moments of Saint Columbanus's mission and a landmark in his life. After years of travels and challenges, facing political and religious adversities, Columbanus arrived in the Ligurian region, between Genoa and Pavia, where he found an ideal location to establish what would become one of the greatest monastic centers of medieval Europe. In 613, after being welcomed by the Lombard king Agilulf, Columbanus received permission to found the Bobbio Monastery. The chosen site was a mountainous, forested, and isolated region, but one that proved fertile for building a solid religious community. Columbanus and his disciples began constructing the monastery, using the land to cultivate and sustain the community. The area had previously been uninhabited, and the foundation of the monastery was a true work of transformation, where monastic life and unceasing prayer became the pillars of the new foundation. Bobbio quickly became one of the most important monastic centers of medieval Europe. Under Columbanus's leadership, the monastery was characterized by the severity of its monastic rules and its intense dedication to spiritual life. Saint Columbanus passed away at the Bobbio Monastery on November 23, 615, at the age of approximately 72, after a life of tireless dedication to spreading the gospel and strengthening the Church in Europe. His feast day is commemorated on November 23. And so, we conclude another story full of fascinating details. Don't forget to leave a comment below about which saint's story you would like to see next on the channel. Until the next story.